In this video, we'll be building a modal. I click on this button, you can see the modal appears, and then when I click on this X, the modal disappears. And if I click outside of it, it also disappears. So I'll show you how to build this in the next section. All right, let's get started. So I'm gonna right click, I'm gonna create a new file, call it index.html. And we're gonna use Emmet to create the document. I'm gonna say modal example. Save that. If I right click and click on open live server, it'll open up. So and you can see modal examples right here. So the next thing I'm going to do is create a style tag, a link tag for our CSS. So we'll do that and we'll go ahead and create that file so we don't forget. So we'll say style.css. That looks good. And now we'll create some HTML. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to copy in the HTML to get us started. So I will have a main tag, and that'll contain the contents of our page. We've got an H1. We got this P wrapping the button so that they take up separate lines. And then we have this background cover that'll cover the whole page when the modal displays. So this is what we'll be working with right now. So now that we have that working, let's go ahead and style this because right now it doesn't look too super good. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is import my font, which is this Nato Sans JP font. You can use whatever font you want. Don't feel pressured to use mine. Next, I'll create a style, force everything to use that font. So you can see it looks a little nicer. And then for the main tag, which remember is right here, we're going to want it to be centered. So we're saying width 80% and left 10%. So it's going to push it 10% from the left. So if I were to do a background color of red, you can see it's 10% from the left and 5% down, but taking up 95% of the height. So if I stretch this out, it's still doing it. So it's using percentages, so everything just auto adjusts, which is nice. So I'll go ahead and take that back and we'll save. And the next thing we're going to want to do is do our button and our H1. And we're just centering everything. So for the button, we're saying take up 100% of the width, so we don't need to center it. But for the H1, we are centering it, and we're doing some font sizes. And the cursor just basically controls the mouse cursor. So that looks good to me. We got our button done. The next thing we'll do is we'll work on our background color. So let's do that. And we'll also copy in the blur as well. So let's go ahead and save that. So you can't see any of this, but if you were to see the background cover, what you would see is that's going to make everything gray, and it's at an opacity of 0.7, so you can see through it a little bit. And its background is fixed, and it's taking up 100% of the web page. And this blur is just giving the main a little bit of a blur, so our content a little bit of a blur. So I can show that to you. Let's say class blur. It'll make it a little blurry, but we'll keep that on actually because we're about to build the modal. And what we can do here is we can just comment this so that when the time comes we can uncomment it. Okay, so let's start on the modal. So the first thing I'm going to do is copy in our HTML for the modal. And it's pretty simple. We'll just paste this in right here. We don't actually need this active class, which is kind of interesting. So I'm going to take that off. So let's go ahead and start coding up our modal styles. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say width 500 px. And we're going to say height auto. So it'll just take up as much space as it needs. We'll say background color white, and that should allow us to see it a little better. Then we'll say position fixed. Most modals are fixed, so it won't matter where the page is scrolled. And we're going to say top 50% for now, left 50%. And we're going to say z index 5, and that should allow us to see it a little better. So So that's looking good. So notice it's not centered because it's 50% from this corner right here. So let's go ahead and fix that with the transform. So we're going to say transform, and then we'll say translate. And this is what's great about Visual Studio, is that it's got all this auto completion for us. So we just say negative 50%, and we do that for the Y, negative 50%. It'll basically move back 50% from its width and height, so that should center everything. So that's good. And because it's 500, it'll just stay centered. And let's see, we're going to do some padding. We'll do padding 0. I don't know why we did that. And then border radius. Let's see, we're going to do 10 pixels for the border radius. Oops. Say 10 pixels for the border radius. And that should do it for now. So let's go ahead and save that. And we'll make everything look a lot better. So the next thing we're going to need to do is let's get our H1 working, or our H2 in our modal header. So we'll do modal head H2, and we can just say margin top 10px and margin bottom 0. Let's see what that does. Okay, and the next one we're going to do is our close. So that's this little X button right here. And we're going to get a little fancy here. So we're going to say modal spam.close, and we're going to position this absolute. So when we position it absolute, it'll be positioning it absolutely within the div. So that's super important to remember. So we're going to say top 8px, and we're going to use right, which is way underused, 20px. So we'll position it 20px from the right. And notice that it's no longer affecting the title at all, which is super important. So let's also do the font size. So I'm going to say font size 20px. Color, we're going to do a gray color. That looks pretty good. And then cursor, we're going to say pointer. And we don't want the user to be able to select it. So that means that the user right now could select it, which is annoying. So we're going to say user select equals none. And that will not allow the user to select it, which is good. So we want it, when we hover over it, we want a little effect. So we want it to go black when we hover over. So what we're going to say is modal. Or what we could do is we could just say spam.close, but I like modal spam.close because we're being more specific in case we have another close on there. So we're going to say color black. And you could specify the color. You could do 000, and it's not working because we forgot to add the pseudo class hover, and now it should. So, oh, that's because I didn't do dot modal. So everyone makes mistakes. It's important. So now it's hovering over. That's looking really, really good. Let's go back to our head, and I'm going to go up here and code the head up a little bit. So we're going to say modal head, and notice that our title right here is just right next to it. So that's super annoying. So let's go ahead and fix that. I'm going to say padding left. Let's start with that because that'll fix that. And we're going to say 20px. So that makes it look a little better. And we're going to also add some padding to the bottom. But a little trick you can do is you can just say border red 1px. And you got to say solid too, like that. So you can see exactly what we're doing. So 20px right here, and then if we do some padding on the bottom of 5px, you can see why we're doing that. So it pushes it up a little bit so it's not right next to the content. So that's looking really good. And we want a border bottom actually of solid. And I'm going to copy this because there's no reason for us to type these colors. Okay, cool. So that's looking really good. Got our border bottom. I'm actually going to make this 0.5. That looks a little, you can't tell the difference. Let's go 1. It's too bad. Okay, so we got that. We got that going. It's looking really good. Next, let's do our content. And this is the easy part. We'll just do modal content. Modal content. And we'll say padding left 20px, just like we did there. So now we've got our modal, and it's looking really, really good. That's another cool thing you can do too, is you can select these colors by hovering over, and you can make it any color of black or gray that you want. So this is really good. The modal doesn't scale, which is kind of what I wanted, and everything's looking really, really good. So now that we have that done, we can start on our JavaScript. And we're going to also have to come back here and add some CSS transitions, but we'll go over that a little later. Okay, so let's get started. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to uncomment this because oops, I do there. I want to uncomment that. So now that'll be display none, and we're going to go back here. We're going to take off this blur class. And I want the modal to come from below. So I'm going to use a little trick. So instead of 50%, we're going to say negative 50%. So we won't be able to see the modal anymore. Okay, so now the modal is like way above the page, which is cool. So now what we can do is start on our JavaScript. So let's do that. So I'm going to say script, and I'll create a script tag, and we're going to get all of our buttons that we're going to need. So I'm using query selector to get all these buttons, and I'm also using EL on all the variable names. So we got our button, our main class, our main thing, which is right here. We got our button. We only have one button. We've got our modal, our close button, and our background cover. So we've got a lot of stuff. So this is really good. So let's go ahead and scroll down a little bit, and let's start creating some of these functions. So I'm going to go ahead and create the event listener so things start working, and we'll start on the function. Yeah, so we'll say event listeners, and we'll start on the button EL. So if you just say button EL add event listener, we're going to listen for a click event, and we're going to want to call the function that does not exist right now called show modal. And this would blow up, so this would cause an error because we don't have that function. So let's go ahead and create it. I'm going to say function show modal. And this could take in an event, but we don't really need it, so that's why we're not taking it in. So when we show the modal, there's a few things we want to do. We want to say main EL class list add, and we want to add the blur class. So that'll make things blurry. And then we want to do background cover style, and we want display, and we're going to set that equal to block. So that'll show the element. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to do modal EL class list add, and we want to add the open class to it. And right now this won't work, or it shouldn't work, because we don't have anything for the open class, but it should give a blur and it should display none. So let's go ahead and click that, and we're going to refresh the page to get back to where we were, but that's what we expected. So let's go here, and we're going to need to add our open class to our modal. So we'll do that. Let me scroll up a bit so I make sure I get it right. And this is where we're going to use some of these transitions. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this transition in so I can explain it. And basically this transition is an ease in, ease out, and we're doing it on the top. So that means this property right here, when that changes, we're going to ease in and ease out, and that's basically how the animation will be played in a half a second. So, and then we're going to go here and we're going to say .modal.open, and now we're going to say top 30%. So I did it at 30%. I think that looked a little better than the 50%, but if you wanted it dead center, you'd do 50%. And then we're going to do transition, just like we did before, and we'll do an ease in, ease out. And there's plenty of these you can choose from. We'll also choose the top property, and we'll do 0.7 or 0.7 seconds. And there's so much you can do with this. But now that should ease in, and it does. So that looks really good. So we've got that working. We need to get the close working, and that's actually pretty easy to do. So let's add a few event listeners. We're going to need a few event listeners for that. One for the close button and one for the close modal. And this is cool because we're going to get an opportunity to reuse some code for this. So we'll say close el.add event listener. It's a click. And I'm just going to call this close modal. And then we're going to target our background cover, which is the gray area right here. Remember, it's taking up 100% of the width. And so anytime you click outside of the modal, you're clicking that. And we're also going to say close modal. And that will error out because there is no close modal. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say function close modal. And we'll do main el class list remove, and we're going to remove the blur, and we can kind of copy this, just change it up a little bit. It's pretty similar. We want this to go back to none, so that'll hide it, and we want to remove instead of add. So let's see how that works. I'm going to click this, and I'm going to click outside. That goes away. I click this, and I'm going to click on the X, and that goes away. So that's how you build a modal. That's the JavaScript, CSS, and all. I'll have links and all the information for this. If you have any feedback about this or any videos that you want to see, please let me know. And I will catch you in the next video.